me 24 hours ago that my biggest concern today would be whether I was about to get beheaded, I would have laughed. Actually, I would have laughed while ordering extra fries. Because yesterday, my biggest life problem was deciding whether I should spend $22 on bubble tea. Don't judge me. Mental health is expensive. I'd survived another 8-hour shift answering emails that somehow became my fault. Your package arrived late, so fix it. Sir, I work in accounting. Apparently accounting now controlled the weather. Good to know. By the time I clocked out, I was running on caffeine, sarcasm, and whatever microscopic hope remained in my body. I was 24, single, chronically online, and my sleep schedule had been designed by a raccoon with anxiety. 3 hours of sleep. I called that rested. My doctor called it a medical concern. Tomato, tomato. I stopped by my usual convenience store. The cashier didn't even ask anymore, just reached for my instant noodles with the weary patience of a man who'd seen too much. I bought chips too, and ice cream. Balance. Walking home, my phone buzzed. Ryan, my best friend. The human equivalent of a golden retriever that had somehow gotten a library card. Did you see the novel I sent you? Hello to you too. The historical BL1. The guy's a noble who spends the whole book chasing this ice-cold general, humiliates himself constantly, and the general never loves him back. He dies. That's almost impressive, I said. So don't read it. You need to suffer with me. What kind of friendship is this? The best kind. I hung up before he could guilt me into downloading it. Then I crossed the street, very responsibly, very mindfully. Very. A truck appeared out of nowhere. I want to be clear, I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't wearing headphones. I wasn't dancing in traffic. The universe simply looked at me, rolled a giant cosmic die, and decided it'd be funny. The last thing I remembered was headlights. Then darkness, then voices. Young master? Someone poked my shoulder. I frowned. 5 more minutes. Young master! I opened my eyes to wood. Lots of wood. Wooden ceiling, wooden walls, wooden furniture. Either IKEA had finally snapped, or something was deeply wrong. I sat up too fast. My head exploded. 3 strangers in ancient robes rushed toward me. One looked ready to cry. One looked ready to faint. And one looked like he was rehearsing a funeral speech. Why are you all dressed like you're filming a historical drama? Silence. Then all 3 dropped to their knees. Whoa, no. No, please get up. This is making me incredibly uncomfortable. The oldest one burst into tears. Heavens be praised. Young master can speak again. Again? I looked around. No lights, no outlets, no glass. Just wooden lattice screens and a polished bronze mirror, which I made the terrible decision of looking into. The face staring back wasn't mine. Soft, pale skin, long black hair past my waist, the kind of bone structure that would put skincare influencers out of business. I touched my cheek. The reflection copied me. No, I said. Nope, I reject this reality. Where are the cameras? Is this immersive theater? I pointed dramatically at the ceiling. Ashton Kutcher? Nothing. Somewhere behind me a servant whispered, The physician did say memory loss was possible. I grabbed the nearest one by the shoulders. What year is it? The 23rd year of Emperor Shen's reign, he said, terrified. That answered absolutely nothing. I looked at the mirror again. Long hair. Ancient robes. A face that wasn't mine. No phone, no electricity, no Wi-Fi, no civilization. I have made a terrible mistake. One question, I said finally. How do people charge their phones here? The room fell into total, devastated silence. A servant leaned toward another and whispered, What is a phone? I closed my eyes and accepted it. I had transmigrated. And judging by the room's collective panic, whoever this beautiful idiot had been before me had left behind a life that was about to become my problem. Here's a theory I developed about 20 minutes too late. If you wake up in another person's body, panic strategically, not immediately. I was already pacing my room, muttering, no internet, no electricity, no plumbing, no food delivery, I'm going to die, while 3 servants watched like nervous zookeepers observing a panda's existential crisis. Finally, the oldest servant cleared his throat. Young master, you are Tyler Shen. Tyler? Seriously? Of all the things I expected, an English first name wasn't one of them. Right, one of those worlds where translators did whatever they wanted. Fine, I'm Tyler. What do I do? I asked. The servants exchanged a look, and the oldest answered very, very carefully. You usually pursue General Adrian. I stared. I'm sorry, I what? Apparently, original Tyler had spent 3 years chasing a general named Adrian Ashford. Love letters, expensive gifts, interrupted banquets. He'd once accidentally fallen into a pond whenever the general walked by. Did it work? I asked. The room went so quiet I could hear birds outside. No, he rejected every attempt. I nodded slowly. As he should. If someone follows me for 3 years after I say no, I'm filing a restraining order. What's a restraining order? I don't know how to explain modern law to people who think bathing is a group activity. Which, speaking of, 2 maids walked in with buckets and reached, unprompted, for my belt. Ladies, what exactly are we doing? Helping young master bathe. No, I have been bathing independently for 24 years. I release you from your duty. I can wash my own armpits. 5 minutes and 1 dramatic speech later, I had convinced everyone to leave. Victory, right up until I discovered there was no shower, just a bucket, a tub, and a tiny wooden scoop. I missed running water so much I nearly cried. Getting dressed was worse. Why did ancient clothing have so many layers? Was the goal to survive winter or develop chronic back pain? By the time the oldest servant took pity and rescued my robes from myself, I'd lost 10 ribbons of pride and gained a small education. Tell me about the general, I said as he worked. General Adrian Ashford is the youngest commander ever appointed by His Majesty. He has never lost a battle. He rarely smiles. He dislikes unnecessary conversation. He rejected every confession you've made. He once said publicly, the servant hesitated, even if everyone in the kingdom disappeared, I still would not marry Tyler Shen. I stared into space. Wow. Even I felt bad. Not for myself, for original Tyler. Getting rejected so thoroughly the rejection became public literature. New rule, I said. If I see this general, I am walking in the opposite direction. I'd rather fight a goose. What's a goose? You'll know when one attacks you. That was, of course, the exact moment a guard burst through the door, out of breath. Young master, the general is here. He has requested to see you. Personally. Every bird outside seemed to stop singing. Me? Voluntarily? Yes. I swallowed hard. This feels like the beginning of a problem. I wanted on record that my brain completely abandoned me the moment I saw him. Standing in the courtyard, dressed in unfairly good black, was a man built like an argument you'd lose. Tall, broad, long dark hair tied back. A jaw you could set a level against. A sword at his waist that looked less like an accessory and more like a threat with good posture. He wasn't trying to look intimidating. He simply existed that way. Okay, original Tyler, I get it now. I completely get it. Then he looked at me, and the attraction evaporated. This man looked like he'd arrest sunshine for loitering. I walked over, carefully, because I was still adjusting to clothes with 17 unnecessary accessories, and when I stopped in front of him I said the single most diplomatically disastrous thing available to me. Hi, the servants inhaled as one. Apparently that wasn't proper etiquette. Too late. Adrian's expression didn't change. You don't remember, he said. Not a question. I hit my head, I said. Technically true. A truck counts as hitting something. He studied me a moment, then nodded once and produced a folded scroll. I came to return these. Poetry. Romantic poetry, comparing his eyebrows to mountain ranges. Then a bundle. Of letters, 83 of them apparently, which was not romance, that was administrative harassment, and finally a jade pendant. This should settle everything, he said. Absolutely, I said, nodding so hard I nearly gave myself whiplash. The letters I'll burn, the poetry also burning. The pendant. A servant coughed violently. I'll treasure it, privately. At a pawn shop. He watched me with something that might, in a man with a face like a locked door, have been suspicion. You're smiling. Yes. Because I'm returning everything? Exactly. Who are you? He asked finally. I laughed. I've been asking myself that all morning. Then my stomach growled, loudly, unpoetically, like an angry dragon demanding compensation, and for 1/2 of 1 second I saw it. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. More like his face briefly considered the possibility. then thought better of it. But I'd seen it, and half the servants in that courtyard had seen it too, which, I would learn within the hour, was apparently enough to convince the entire capital that General Adrian had smiled lovingly at me and that a wedding might happen before winter. "Absolutely not," I said to a gardener, loud enough to startle birds out of a tree. "You're not courting. I met the man for 6 minutes. That's enough for destiny. That's enough for awkward eye contact." By the next morning, roosters had replaced my alarm clock, and I had discovered, via extremely undignified trial and error, that Adrian's estate happened to be my backyard neighbor, connected by the same koi pond I liked to complain to at night. He caught me there once, telling a fat, emotionally unavailable fish about my old apartment. "Talking to fish?" a deep voice said, and I nearly went into the pond myself. You scared 10 years off my life. I announced my presence. You materialized. Suspiciously, we stood there a while, listening to the water, until he asked quietly, like he wasn't sure he should, "You seemed different earlier, when you were alone." "I was missing home," I admitted. "You are home." The answer came immediately, without hesitation, and it caught me off guard enough that I had to look away. "Not the one I meant," I said. He didn't press, just waited in that oddly comforting way he had. Eventually I asked, "Have you ever missed someone so much you start forgetting the sound of their voice?" Something in his eyes softened. "My parents," he said simply. "They died when I was young. I'm sorry. So was I." We both laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because the awkward wording made the sadness easier to carry. And that, more than the pond, more than the poetry, more than the 83 letters, was the first moment I understood this wasn't just going to be a funny story I told myself to survive. Something in me had already started leaning toward him, which was deeply inconvenient because I had sworn, that very morning, to never develop feelings for the one man I'd promised to avoid. Fate, clearly, had stopped listening to my opinions. Word of my reformed heart, and by accidental coffee invention, which is a whole separate disaster involving roasted beans, a mortar and pestle, and a head cook who aged 10 years watching me cook dirt on purpose, reached the palace faster than I could explain either. Which is how, less than 48 hours after waking up in a stranger's body, I found myself bowing to the emperor of an empire I didn't belong to, demonstrating a beverage I'd invented from memory and desperation, while an old noble named Lord Han stood up in the middle of the audience hall and asked the one question I couldn't answer. How can we be certain the man standing before us is truly Tyler Shen? The hall went silent enough to hear a feather land. I looked at Adrian. He looked back, steady, grounding, like he was silently saying, "Don't panic." "I cannot prove I'm the Tyler everyone remembers," I said finally. "But I also can't pretend nothing's changed. I nearly died. My memories came back scattered, some pieces, not others. I suppose almost dying changes people." "Convenient," Lord Han scoffed. "Not really," I said. "I would have preferred a vacation." Adrian spoke for the first time. "Everything he said is true. He has not approached me, sent gifts, or written letters since he woke. He has honored my wishes." He paused. I find it admirable. The Emperor watched the whole exchange with unmistakable, dangerous amusement. "People may change," he said. "They may also deserve the chance to prove it." Then, to me, "I would like coffee served in the palace. General Adrian will oversee the venture." A pause, a smile that promised trouble. "And you, young Master Tyler, will be the only person permitted to teach him." I stared between them. "You've assigned me to spend time alone with the general." "Frequently." "Frequently," the Emperor agreed, with the innocence of a man who knew exactly what he'd done. Beside me, for the third time since I'd met him, General Adrian smiled. A real one. Small, soft, and dangerously handsome. I stared for exactly 1 second too long, then looked away fast. Nope. Absolutely not. I was not going to fall for the one man I'd sworn to keep my distance from. That would be ridiculous. Teaching a general to make coffee turns out to be exactly as chaotic as it sounds, especially when his idea of grinding beans gently is closer to interrogating a criminal. His soldiers, meanwhile, discovered caffeine with the enthusiasm of men who had never once been allowed to enjoy anything, and within a week his famously disciplined training yard had turned into a small civil war over who got the last cup. I like to think I'd invented a miracle beverage. Really, I'd just invented an excuse for an entire army to stop pretending they didn't have feelings. "You know," Adrian said one afternoon, watching two of his soldiers argue over a pot like it contained state secrets, "your soldiers are scared of you." "They respect me," he said. "They respect you so hard they're developing anxiety." For just a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched, the same almost smile from the courtyard, except now I was starting to recognize it. Starting to look forward to it, which was a problem I was actively choosing not to examine. It was around then that the tea incident happened. A servant brought refreshments, nothing unusual, jasmine tea, poured the way it always was. Except his hands were shaking. Just slightly. And when our eyes met for half a second, he looked less guilty than terrified, like he was screaming something behind his teeth he couldn't say out loud. I didn't drink it. Couldn't explain why. Just a feeling. The kind you get right before your brain catches up to something your gut already knows. Without really thinking, I swapped my cup for Adrian's. The servant's face went white. The teapot shattered on the floor. And then he was on his knees, sobbing that his family had been threatened, that he'd had no choice, that the tea, both cups, it turned out, had been poisoned. I won't pretend that wasn't terrifying. It was. Physicians confirmed the poison with a silver needle that turned black in seconds, and for a long, ugly minute, the pavilion went dead silent except for the servants crying. What stayed with me longer than the fear, though, was Adrian's face in the second right after. Not anger. Not yet. Just something raw and unguarded, like the ground had genuinely opened under him at the thought that I might have drunk it. He'd faced armies without blinking. He looked, in that moment, terrified. Later, once the servant's family had been found safe and the shaking had mostly stopped, I asked him quietly, "If I hadn't switched the cups, who do you think they were after?" "You," he said, without hesitation. "Why so sure?" "They expected the Tyler they knew. Reckless. Careless." He looked at me, really looked. Not someone who notices frightened hands. Back home, nobody had ever called me observant, forgettable, sure. Quiet, frequently, but not that. It landed harder than I expected. We never found out exactly who sent the poison, a servant terrified into obedience. No names, no proof, the trail as thin as smoke. Adrian doubled his guards and said, in the flat voice he used when he meant business, that he intended to find out eventually. I believed him. But neither of us let it swallow the weeks that followed, and honestly I think that was the right call. Some mysteries you chase. Others you let sit. And you live your life around them instead of letting them run it. What I did find, a little while later, going through his study looking for absolutely nothing suspicious, I just like books, Your Honor, was a small, dusty wooden box that had clearly not been opened in years. "I've never seen that box," Adrian admitted. "It belonged to my father. Inside were letters. Dozens, tied with a faded blue ribbon, addressed to him, from original Tyler. None of them had ever been opened." "You may," Adrian said quietly when I hesitated. "If father kept it, perhaps he meant for someone to find it." I unfolded the first one. "General Adrian, I know you'll probably never read this. I finally realized today that you really don't love me." "That's okay. I think I've been trying so hard to make everyone choose me that I forgot to choose myself." My chest tightened. I kept reading. They laugh when I speak. So I started speaking less. Then they laughed because I was quiet. I don't really know which version of me people hate anymore. There were more. So many more. One wasn't a letter at all. Just a private thought, never meant for anyone. Sometimes I wonder if I'd disappeared, how long it would take before anyone noticed. I had to close my eyes, because I'd had that exact thought before. Back in my old life, on the subway, walking home from a shift, lying awake at 3 a.m, not because I wanted to disappear. Just because loneliness makes your brain ask cruel questions. For a moment, the distance between my world and Tyler's didn't feel so large. Adrian sat beside me, not crowding, just close enough. "I was wrong," he said finally. "I thought ignoring him was kinder than giving him false hope. I never realized how alone he truly was." I tied the ribbon carefully back around the letters. "He loved you," I said. "But I don't think you were ever really what he was chasing. I think he just wanted someone to look at him, and actually see him." Neither of us spoke for a long while after that. It didn't need filling. Life for a little while got almost normal, which, for a man wearing 17 layers of fabric and drinking coffee out of a porcelain cup, is a strange thing to call normal. But there it was. Mornings at Adrian's estate. Afternoons teaching servants to wash their hands before cooking, which the head cook took as a personal insult. Evenings accidentally introducing modern habits nobody asked for. By the third day, even the steward had started keeping a written inventory instead of remembering later, which, as I pointed out, is just a fancy phrase for discovering the problem. Then Lord Han visited Adrian's estate, uninvited, and whatever warmth had settled over the training yard that morning disappeared the second his name was announced. "Who's Lord Han to you?" I asked. "Someone who rarely visits without bringing trouble," Adrian said, eyes on the gate. He wasn't wrong. Lord Han's visit turned out to be less an accusation than a warning. Rumors were spreading, he said, about the old case surrounding Tyler's mother, Lady Evelyn, and about convenient timing surrounding my sudden change of heart. He didn't accuse me outright. He didn't have to. The implication sat in the room like a bad smell. "People talk," Adrian said flatly, once Lord Han had gone. "Let them. That easy for you to say. You're not the one everyone thinks murdered his own mother by proxy." He looked at me then, and something in his face went very still. "No one believes that? Someone clearly does, or wants people to... We didn't chase it that day. I want to be honest about that. We didn't drop everything and turn into detectives. But it sat there quietly, under everything else, the way a splinter does. And a few nights later, going through old ledgers in my own family's archive looking for something completely unrelated, I found the thread that made it impossible to ignore. A single line in Lady Evelyn's handwriting, tucked in the margin of an old account book. "If you are reading this, they fail to silence us. Trust no one who comes offering easy answers." Beneath it, a small folded letter, sealed, addressed simply to my son, open only if I fail to return. I sat with that letter in my hands for a long time before I told Adrian about it. "I don't know if I should read it," I admitted. "Whatever you choose," he said. "I'll respect it." I didn't open it that night. Some truths, I decided, deserved to be met on my own terms, not stumbled into at midnight out of guilt. But I also didn't put it away. I kept it close, a promise to myself, and to a woman I'd never met, that I wouldn't let her last words to her son gather dust in a drawer forever. I opened the letter 3 days later, in the quiet of my own study, with Adrian sitting across from me. Not because I needed him there, but because I wanted him there, which I'd slowly stopped being embarrassed about. It wasn't long. Lady Evelyn hadn't written a confession or a conspiracy map. She'd written a mother's letter, worried, tender, and full of the kind of ordinary hope that made it hurt more than any grand revelation could have. "My darling Tyler, if you are reading this, I am sorry I couldn't tell you myself. I only ask that you don't let anyone convince you that being loved loudly means being loved badly. You deserve someone who chooses you quietly and stays. Whatever they say about me, whatever they say about you, none of it was ever your fault. Ride toward kind people, my love. Always." I read it twice. Then a third time, my throat tight enough to ache. She knew, I said finally, that people might come for her, and she still wrote this, not answers, not names. Just this. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Some people leave behind evidence," he said. "Others leave behind permission." I looked up at him. "Permission for what?" "To stop looking for who to blame," he said, "and start living like she wanted you to. It wasn't a tidy ending. We never did learn exactly who'd wanted the letters gone, or who'd whispered doubts into Lord Han's ear, or who had, 12 years ago, wanted Lady Evelyn silenced badly enough to try." Adrian kept people quietly watching the old threads. In the patient, methodical way he did everything, and I made my peace with the fact that some doors in this world were going to stay shut for a while longer. Maybe forever. That used to bother me more than it did by the end. What mattered more, in the weeks after, was this: I stopped flinching every time someone brought up original Tyler's name. I stopped needing to solve the mystery of who he'd been in order to grieve him properly. I visited his portrait one evening, alone, and told him out loud, feeling only a little ridiculous, that I was sorry. That I'd judged him before I understood him. That his mother had loved him. That people finally knew it. And that I hoped wherever he was, that was enough. He would be, a familiar voice said behind me. Adrian walked with me to the garden after. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he stopped. I owe you an apology, he said. For what? I spent years believing Tyler only wanted my affection. I never realized he needed kindness. He deserved both. He did, I agreed. A silence. Comfortable this time. Do you still wish to return? He asked. To your world? My smile faded just a little. I miss them, I admitted. I always will. I miss Wi-Fi, hot showers, hoodies. He nodded seriously, like he was cataloguing threats. But I looked around at the estate. At Jun proudly carrying a tray without spilling anything. At soldiers, arguing over the last cup of coffee like it was a matter of national security. At this ridiculous, impossible life that had somehow, without my permission, become mine. I think I've already found home. Adrian stepped closer. Not dramatically, just closer. There is something I wish to say. I know, I said. I've caught you staring. Have you? Constantly. I believed I was subtle. You were adorable. For the first time since I'd met him, General Adrian actually laughed, a real one, warm and unguarded, and it suited him more than any of his careful, almost smiles ever had. I don't know whether heaven sent you, or fate, or plain chance, he said. I only know that the person standing in front of me is the one I love. My heart didn't stop dramatically. It settled, quietly, like something finally finding the place it had always belonged. I was worried, I admitted, that you'd only love the face. He shook his head. I loved the face first, he said. I fell in love with the soul. So, I said, grinning despite myself, are you asking me out? I don't know what that means. It's basically permission to hold my hand forever. He looked down at our joined hands like he was confirming something he already suspected. I believe, he said. I've already started. 6 months later, coffee houses had opened across the capital. Soldiers drank it before drills. Scholars swore it doubled their productivity. Merchants swore it doubled their profits. Nobody admitted it also doubled bad decisions. Jun proudly ran the very first shop. The sign read Young Master's Bitter Bean. I tried to change it. Nobody listened. I also invented the hoodie, which the royal tailors treated as a personal attack. It's too simple. It has pockets. Pockets? Trust me. 3 weeks later, half the capital owned one, including, very secretly, General Adrian, who insisted he only wore his indoors right up until Jun caught him napping in it, and Captain Zhao caught him reading in it, and I caught him pretending he hadn't already asked the tailor for 3 more. One evening, walking beside the koi pond, I told him about the truck, about the $22 of bubble tea I never got to drink, about how the biggest problem in my old life had been overdue rent, and the biggest problem in this one had briefly been an entire kingdom convinced I'd murdered my own mother by proxy, and how, somehow, this one felt lighter to carry. I searched every province, Adrian said, apropos of nothing. What? For your phone, I still haven't found it. I laughed so hard I stepped backward, straight toward the pond, and slipped, because some things never change, and a familiar hand caught my wrist before I hit the water. Steady, warm, exactly on time the way it always was now. One day, he sighed with the fond exhaustion of a man who had accepted his fate, you'll stop trying to fall into ponds. Maybe, I said, lacing my fingers through his. But then who would give you an excuse to catch me? He rolled his eyes. Then very gently he kissed my forehead. I suspect, he murmured. You'll always find one. And for the first time since I'd opened my eyes in a world that wasn't mine, I understood something simple. I hadn't just survived someone else's story. Together, we'd finally given it the ending it deserved. The end